Okay, so we are back, hoping that you are joining us for Explore 5 for this week, and that maybe this will make things a little clearer when you answer some of your multiple choice questions and fill in the blanks. So we covered Africa and North Africa and the Middle East, and we're going to move into the section about South Asia in what would be modern day India and Pakistan. And remember that you have to understand that Britain, during this time period of imperialism, became the country that dominated or influenced or owned more land than any other nation within our history of man. So this is where we focus on Britain's imperial powers in India and Pakistan. So if you'll recall, we talked about the British East India Trade Company that had been established even during the Age of Exploration along the coast of India. So that started in the 1700s by the trading outposts that were sprinkled along this Indian coastline. And of course, the trade company that was owned by Britain here was called the British East India Company. Oops, and I'm going kind of crazy. Mostly, predominantly tea at this time. So around 1750, we're getting into the 1800s. We're talking imperialism. Great Britain decided it would go beyond just the trade and try to conquer India. So with this idea, this belief that India would be strengthened by its benevolence or its well-meaning rule. This belief, that was one reason why they did it. They thought they would be good leaders for these Indians. They thought apparently needed some leading. This belief, along with the desire to expand the British Empire, led Great Britain to attack the Indian states, and so by 1800 they pretty much had conquered most of India. Now, what is it that we know is the religious aspect, the dominant religion in India? Of course, that is Hindu. And so when they took control of these portions of India, they would appoint governors to rule whatever colony it was. And these governors, of course, had to be British. So focusing on a particular governor, James Andrew Brown Ramsay, he developed this policy called the Doctrine of Lapse, which said that a traditional Hindu custom in India was now going to change, okay, in the fact that these Hindus would adopt a successor to be in charge of the particular area if there was not already an heir. So he steps in and says, well, we're going to call this the Doctrine of Lapse policy. And now if you want to approve a new Hindu leader, the Hindu people don't do it. It's going to have to be approved by Britain. And of course, this was a very unpopular policy with the Hindus because really the British were just using it to reject and be unsatisfied with any person that the Hindu picked, and just sort of took that upon themselves to start appointing new rulers so that they could be in charge. So you have your first issue here with British leadership kind of changing a custom in India. So now going back to this British East India Company, its primary economic force, and again, we're looking at a lot of tea and those outposts along India. They also had established those in China and Africa. And so the main purpose was to make money by trading spices and goods. And along these outposts, there was danger. And so the British government decided they would employ not British officers and military, but they would pay some of the Indians to be in their army and protect these outposts. Okay, so moving in and changing some of the what became to know the sepoys, their military, this Indian military. When the British moved in, they would try to change some of their customs and traditions as they had to fit in with the military. So what happened was the sepoys, and this is all in this paragraph if you want to read it. I'm just going to paraphrase it for you. But the sepoys were using British rifles, and the cartridges that they were loading in these British rifles supposedly were lubricated with cow lard. And if you know anything about your Hindu tradition, they worship the cow, and so they don't want to do anything that would be offensive to the cow. And they were having to lubricate their guns with this cow lard. And so these sepoys, these British trained soldiers who were really Indians, okay, became highly upset about the use of this cow lard in the guns. And so, among other things, the tension over this particular issue erupted into what came to be known as the Sepoy Rebellion. Now, remember, let's make this clear. You got to understand the Sepoys were Indians who were British trained soldiers that were defending these outposts along the Indian coastline. And they were unhappy with what was going on with their guns. So there was a rebellion. So essentially, violence and destruction resulted on both sides as the British attempted to put down the mutiny. And eventually, the British regained control in July of 1858. Now, why is this little tiny rebellion so significant? Okay, well, it was a turning point for the people because there was so much bloodshed during this uprising. The British Crown decided we have to intervene here, and we are going to take back control of the British East India Company rather than letting some of our just regular citizens be in charge of this and manage this East India Company. We're going to have to take back control of the company. And again, this eye-opening experience for the Crown, they decided perhaps if we don't want our own army to revolt against us, we should probably start treating the sepoys better as well as just the Indian people in general. So that led to a positive. The rebellion was a positive outcome for the citizens of India in that way. The article here also notes that they began selling European goods in India and working on that infrastructure that they thought might be important to help them, of course, develop their trade with the Indians. Okay. So in blue, I have highlighted some of the positives that did come about because of imperialism by Britain in India. New technologies and new infrastructure. And with these improvements, there was some increase in education of the Indian people. However, if we're trying to look at did the scales balance out with the positives and negatives overall, it appears that it was more of a negative thing, imperialism by the British. So while you had some becoming wealthy and educated, it left the masses uneducated and poor and started to break down some of their Hindu traditions within their society and weaken some of the social systems in the communities that were centered around Hinduism. So this is where we leave off, and then we will get to the revolution in India, the war against Britain, which we will talk about next week, and then we'll move on into World War I at that point after we have our review. So I hope this was helpful to you, especially understanding the Sepoy Rebellion, because that's rather confusing. And again, um, I'll see you on Zoom or have a great week working from home if I don't have any communications with you on Zoom.